Welcome back to our three friends, the three old friends. I forgot that qualifier that we are old. Three old friends, the music never ends. We're up to number 44 on our playlist. We've been doing this a couple of years now, and as one of the themes that we've been trying to get to is to pick a single artist or group and just focus just all the songs on their career. And so we've done, I think we've done the Beatles, we've done Bob Dylan, we've done the Rolling Stones. And so we thought we'd do it again. And so it was my turn. And I said, well, let's go ahead and pick Pink Floyd. I know we all three admire to some degree and like Pink Floyd's music a lot. So let's go ahead and feature them this month, this time. And so all the songs will be about Pink Floyd. We'll get into a little bit of the songs and the history of Pink Floyd, I'm sure. So I had the privilege of kicking it off, and that's always a hard thing to do when you're going, wow, there's such a major catalog of songs all throughout their career. Now, one thing we did do was a little interesting this time is we wanted to have a good representative sampling of all of their music. So rather than just say pick whatever songs you like, we did kind of do a draft of most of their major albums and had each of us pick one of the albums. So we had to stick with the album that we had picked. Each one of us picked four different albums, and then we all had a wild card where we could pick one song from any album. So without further ado, that's how it sets up. I had the first song, and luckily in the draft or in the draw, I had picked "Dark Side of the Moon," one of the most iconic, classic, famous albums of Pink Floyd. But then I had to say, okay, what song should we kick this thing off with? And for me, one of my favorite songs is "Time," because of just the having all the bells and the things that are going on with that, and then how the drums come in, and then just a great song. And so I started it off with "Time." I will also say you'll probably hear a theme throughout, but with "Dark Side of the Moon" being one of their most famous albums, I also have a connection with the Alan Parsons Project and Alan Parsons loving his music, and he was one of the engineers on that award-winning album. So it was probably some of his input that put together some of that sounds that you hear in Dark Side of the Moon. And once you hear that, hear the bells chiming, you know right away that that's a Pink Floyd classic.
Yeah, before I start, yeah, I love Pink Floyd. I think they're in my top five. I probably said it before, but Pink Floyd, it means a lot because it's also my son's favorite album, of his favorite group. It also has a connection with both of y'all because Mike and I saw Pink Floyd back in the day, and Dave and I saw Roger Waters. I think I've seen Roger Waters 4 times. Obviously, seen Pink Floyd. And I've even seen Nick Mason do his Saucer Full of Secrets, where he does early Pink Floyd. So yeah, I'm glad you picked Pink Floyd. They mean a lot to me. I've read at least 5 or 6 books. I think I collect books now on Pink Floyd. I don't know why, but I do. And yeah, and of course, it's a great start with Dark Side of the Moon and Time because that is probably their quintessential album. As many great albums as they have, as much history that they have, uh, Dark Side was and is probably one of the top 5 albums of all time. Just as it flows from start to finish. It's almost a perfect album. You have people who don't even who don't aren't even might not be big into Pink Floyd, but like Dark Side of the Moon. Like my sister-in-law, she is in music, but has dark, and of course, so this album. So it was a great pick to start out with Time, and you know, it's a representative of what Pink Floyd is.
Yeah, just me and my history of Pink Floyd. I saw them. I actually saw them twice that tour. I don't know why. Once was in Dallas and once in Austin with when it was the latter without Roger Waters. Then I got to see Roger Waters twice. One, I was at the same show you guys were at. For some reason, I was thinking that we saw it, but maybe saw it with somebody else. But I definitely was at the Roger Waters show there, and then saw him in Dallas a couple years ago. And I saw David Gilmour solo And the only thing I'll add to that, I won't go into any more details. I may have told this, but twice I've seen once David Gilmour on his own, and once the three remaining members, minus Roger Waters, saw them in some public place and struck up a conversation with David Gilmour, both in both cases. And one, it was in Moscow, and they're all at this table. The show had been canceled because of a tragedy. And in both cases, I just thought I'll be witty. I'll say something funny, which when you're nervous and starstruck and you're me, is never a good idea. Both times I said something really inane that thinking I was going to be funny, that to this day, I'm like, oh man. But you know, they were some of my musical heroes up there. Um, yeah, like you said, probably top five. This album, you know, who couldn't love something from this album? I mean, it's just like there's so much to it that there's like a running story in a way through it about, you know, one living their life. And this song, Time, you know, it's racing the sun. You know, you started late. Life is short. You didn't realize you better get to it. And kind of a life lesson there. I've always loved that song. The beginning with the with the old clocks and the bells, that never fails to startle me. It's just quiet. There's a heartbeat, I think. Is that the one that starts like that, or is that the beginning of the whatever? Anyway, and then all of a sudden there's these bells. So, but it's a great song. We've had Us and Them in this version of our playlists way back there. I don't remember which one it was, and I'm trying to think if we had anything else off this record. But there's every track is just golden, you know. Anyway, blah blah blah, and so I went into what was one of my other early favorites, Animals, and it's basically four songs: Pigs on the Wing, and then Sheepdogs and Pigs. And I don't know how much this ties into Animal Farm. I think Sheep is more. It's kind of more has that kind of thing in Animal Farm, George Orwell's Animal Farm, with the sheep have a rebellion when they're being marched to the slaughter and take over, but then the new leaders are just as brutal, just like the pigs in, you know, in Animal Farm. But yeah, this album and Wish You Were Here, I had both of these on 8-track. All my early stories are 8-tracks, and just played those things to death. So couldn't miss this one.
You know, you know, what do you say about Animals? It's, you know, it has all the long songs on it and a couple short ones, whatever. But, um, you know, I want to say you have to be in the mood for Animals, because it doesn't take much to get you in the mood once you put that on, and it's like, wow, this is really good. I'd say out of all the long songs on this one, you know, you got Dogs, Sheep, and then I think Pigs are the three long songs they have. I think this is my favorite cut on it. Um, I don't know. There's something about it. When I went back and listened to this playlist a few times, this is a song that I kept coming back to, and I'd be like, oh, I think there are a couple times I even listened to it a couple times in a row. Um, it's just I don't know. It's Roger Waters starting to really figure out who he is and what he's writing, and the lyrics and stuff. Again, you know, you think about calm, peaceful sheep, and then they're going to go to the slaughterhouse, right? Or, you know, I like that line, I'm meek and obedient. They follow the leader down well-trodden corridors into the valley of steel. I mean, but the beat of it and the way that song presents itself, it doesn't feel long, even though it's 10 minutes or so, because they have that part towards the end where if you're not listening or actually looking at the lyrics, you can't really tell what they're saying. I try to listen a couple times, and it's like it has a play on the Lord. What's the what's the thing where he layeth me down in green pastures, and the famous scripture or whatever for that. But you have the sheep in there kind of going, yeah, but we're gonna learn karate and we're gonna fight back and we're gonna. So that's kind of fun. And but anyway, I love the song. It's one of my favorites. I don't know what more I can say about it.
Psalms 23. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Jose.
Hey,
Bring it.
coming with the.
I've read a lot about these, the Floyd, because it was there's different versions out there. If you listen to certain and of course on the 75 tour, there's certain bootlegs out there where Raving and Drooling and the other one, there's two versions of these songs that they played live that they scrapped to do Wish You Were Here. But you can hear the parts of those songs if you have the 75, some 75 bootlegs that are out there. That the first two songs are animal songs, not like they came off in the album, but how they played, because then they scrapped it and then they did Wish You Were Here. So anyway, little tidbits, people know this stuff. And that album is just a complete album, and it really was the beginning of the end. If you know about what went on behind the scenes, and it was the beginning of the sniping, and you're not doing this, and I'm going to overdub that, but probably I say David Gilmour's best guitar work on an album. That's just my personal opinion. I mean, he's fantastic guitarist, but those three songs, just amazing work. So I followed that up with Sorrow off Momentary. I picked Momentary Lapse, which was the tour that we saw him on, and this was the first one without Roger Waters. And some people might say that that's not Pink Floyd, but obviously they proved them wrong because
Roger Waters would say that's not Pink Floyd.
well, Roger Waters spotted him in concert, and then
You will not survive without me, right? Is that what he said?
oh yeah, he said a lot of things like, and then why are you using all my songs, and Pink Floyd. He actually thought, and Dave Gilmour said this. He thought he was Pink Floyd, and Dave Gilmour's like, no, we are Pink Floyd, and you're just a part of it, like anyone else. Like, and I'm sure we'll get eventually into Sid Barrett and what happened there, but yeah, David Gilmour kind of proved him wrong, because there's a lot of factors, but obviously Pink Floyd, the name, it just stands out among a lot of things. So fans definitely gravitated to that. So while we had Roger Waters doing like his Radio Chaos, which we saw him, and then saw the Floyd a month later, you could tell the difference. And I'll talk about what I really think the difference is later. But that album is just one of the most fantastic. So I picked Sorrow, Momentary Lapse. I think it's a solid album. I think there's some solid songs on there. Obviously, there's some great songs. This is one written by David Gilmour, who there are certain songs on there that he didn't write, and there are songs by Paulie Sampson that'd be later on. But he kept Richard Wright and he kept Nick Mason, and they were successful with it. And I thought I picked this one. I think it's a great song off the album. I didn't do Learning to Fly, which is pretty standard, which was a hit off that. But I picked it because of the guitar work leading from Sheep. I think there's some great guitar work on Sorrow. And it's a great song, and it's a powerful song if you really listen to the lyrics.
Yeah, I agree. I think the only other song I can think of that back in the day I used Dogs of War on a playlist at some point. But this one, I know that one. This one, you're right about the guitar playing, and I like it with David Gilmour's guitar playing. He's played with a number of other musicians, and when you hear that, you're like, yeah, that's got to be David Gilmour. He's had such a distinctive sound. But I used to have this. I had a cassette. Once upon a time, I used to run when I first moved to Austin for school, and I go running around Town Lake, and I had a tape with this on one side, and I'm gonna blank out the name of it, but a REM album that had come out. It had the one that has "End of the World as We Know It" and Firehouse and all those Fallen. No, it was a different one. Anyway, whatever. I would just listen to those over and over. They'd flip, as I was going, and so this one I got a lot of listening to back in the day, and love it. There's not much else I can say. They they proved that Pink Floyd was still alive. It was a different iteration, but it was still something that they continued on for at least another album, I guess.
Right.
Anyway.
Well, this is one of the albums that I didn't own at the time. Maybe maybe as I look back, I was a Roger Waters, fan and went, maybe I was in his court on that. But for whatever reason, I didn't have this album, so I only heard the songs that got a little bit of airplay. It wasn't until later in life that I picked it up and listened to more of it later on. So I wasn't super familiar with this track, but I liked how we went from sheep to sorrow because it was kind of like pretty sad for the sheep, really. But yeah, great guitar work on it. Like I said, I probably need to get back, listen to more of this album. I hadn't really listened cover to cover on this Momentary Lapse of Reason. Maybe I had a momentary lapse of reason. I need to go back to it, but
why did you go to Floyd with it? Were you already in Colorado by
I've not seen Pink Floyd, so it's
right. Why didn't he go in 88? Were you already in Colorado by 88?
89. It wasn't until 89 that
I don't know why. Maybe because I don't know.
I was probably doing my own thing, and who knows, working, going to school, too busy.
Yeah, okay. Anyway.
Yeah, I thought you were there too. You did go see Roger Waters?
Yeah, we went together to see Radio Chaos.
Yeah, saw that.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, that was interesting. I'm stepping on your day for saying, but that they were on tour at the same time.
Right.
Makes you wonder if they ever crossed paths in any airport or.
Well, there's the famous story that Roger Waters' auditorium would be half empty, and there'd be 60,000 people, and he'd be hearing his own songs being played, and there's 60,000 people there, and there's only like 7,000 at his concert. One of the reasons he was a little pissed off, I can obviously imagine. So anyway,
sorry, Dave.
So when you go back and listen to the early works of not just Pink Floyd, but a lot of artists, right? You kind of get that, that's that album, that first album, and it's never that great, but you can start hearing, they could be really good. Things like with Rush and with some of these other bands, it's like, yeah, it's not so great, but you can see how they're going to start building to become the group that they are now. So I had Piper at the Gates of Dawn, which is their first album, which is laden with their founder, which is Syd Barrett. No, if our audience knows the whole story, but he basically overdosed on some stuff and blew his mind, essentially, right? Did something, and he was never the same. And then he died. I don't know if he died of it. I don't think he died of a drug overdose, but he just was never the same. He fried his brain, and then Pink Floyd moved on from him, or he moved on from them. He quit them. He whatever. Just couldn't do it anymore. And that first album, really, I think there's only one song written by Roger Waters, and maybe one by Richard Wright or whatever. But the rest is all Syd Barrett stuff, and a lot of it's because of the lyrics and stuff that he did. Now, so I was gonna pick one of those songs, and I just couldn't do it. They were just too weird for me, I guess, or whatever. So, but the song I picked was pretty weird. It was called a song called Pal R, capital R, Talk, TOC, capital H. And it's pretty much an instrumental, but there's voices and sound effects and stuff like that going on where they're doing different stuff. And it has a pretty cool piano solo in it early on, and it kind of just shows the groups, start, kind of figuring things out, but it doesn't have the Syd Barrett lyrics. A couple of songs, if you get a chance to go back to, Matilda Mother was one I thought of, and another one called Flaming, and another one called Bike that were on that album that, but really, if you go back and listen, he's talking about like riding on unicorns and dandelions and traveling through phones, and I mean, he just comes up with some real weird stuff. So anyway, I thought this was a cool instrumental though that really captured what early Floyd was like.
Yeah, and Mike and I, behind the scenes, we were talking about, I will talk a little bit about Sid Barrett. Now, Sid Barrett, this album is groundbreaking because it introduced a whole different psychedelic world. Now, people love to throw around that Sid Barrett was a genius. You can say that if you want. I mean, he did introduce the Floyd to people and he wrote these songs. And the singles that Mike, we talk about See Emily Play and Arnold Lane. I mean, it is groundbreaking in a lot of ways. Now, having said that, and I've said this to Mike before, Sid Barrett losing his mind, so to speak, and he shows up. There's the famous story where he showed up at the Wish You Were Here recordings. He was bald, and that's where you get the eye thing, you know, just like black hole in the sun, you know, those kind of things. And he died in the 2000s, but he was around. But he was definitely shot. But it took, unfortunately, for Sid Barrett to kind of lose his mind for the Floyd to really start capturing their essence. You know, he did write songs for the second album. They played them, but he wasn't a part of it really. But it took that to push Roger Waters, Richard Wright, and Nick Mason, and then eventually they get on David Gilmour. And I don't know if anyone wants to talk about that story, how they got David Gilmour. They just stopped picking up Sid Barrett. Essentially, he's too fucked up. Sorry, he's too screwed up. We're just not going to pick him up this gig, and they went on without him. And imagine if they never would have done that. You know, we wouldn't have the Floyd that we have. So, having said all that, it is a great song. It is a groundbreaking album. It is considered groundbreaking. It came out in '67. Sgt. Pepper's is considered psychedelic, but when you put it against Pipers at the Gates, it's like psychedelic pop compared to real psychedelic music. And so, I admire what Sid Barrett did. He was definitely different. Do I think he's a genius? You could throw that around, but yeah, just it's a fun album to listen to because you knew where they were going. Like Dave said, this is the foundation for them. So, okay, end rant.
No, carry on. Yeah, so I'll probably be the staunchest defender of this record, but yeah, exactly everything you said, Jose. But is it easily approached? Not really. I mean, can you put it on a road trip? I guess, but it's not really. It doesn't
trip
really flow. You know, it has some parts, songs that are near and dear to me. You mentioned Bike. For some reason, I love that song. That's all Sid Barrett all the way. And it has that weird, freaky ending with the ducks or whatever it is. Yeah, he did. He was. I heard a story that at one point, toward the end of the time, they'd have him on stage, but they wouldn't even have his guitar turned on. He would just be strumming, maybe not even a chord. He had just kind of just done his. And I think in addition that there was already some mental illness there, this just exacerbated it, if I understand correctly. And I've heard stories like, you know, back in the day, when they really were kind of breaking, you know, these kind of new barriers with psychedelic stuff, that all the people, like all these famous, like the Who, members of the Who, or the Stones or whatever, they go see them. This whole experience with the lights, and not like the, you know, high tech stuff like later, but those whatever those blob things that they used to have, like you put
Lava
a,
lamps. And
yeah, kind of stuff. And I'm sure people were doing all kinds of illicit substances. Um, I was going to say something else. Oh, you mentioned Sergeant Pepper's, and I'll, if I may, refer to something on Wikipedia about this song. It said, according to Nick Mason, the original four members of Pink Floyd were present in Abbey Road Studios and watched the Beatles record Lovely Rita from Sergeant Pepper's Lonely Heart Club Band. Voice effects and noises similar to those used in Lovely Rita could be heard in this song. I'm not sure they're exactly like the Lovely Rita sounds, but apparently there was some influence from one to the other. Maybe that's how was Alan Parsons involved with Sergeant Pepper's? or was he later? I mean, Abbey Roads. I know
Abbey Road, yeah.
he was connected to Abbey Roads. Anyway, whatever. Yeah, so I decided to follow. I'm like, what do I follow that with? And I do like the piano. You're right. It's kind of this kind of jazzy, interesting time signature piano part, and they kind of gets it all in a groove, and they kind of it falls apart again into whatever those bird sounds or whatever it is. So yeah, I thought, well, I'll go something a little more, I guess, extreme. So metal. I think that was the first one of their albums I actually bought, and they used to play it on. I was talking with Jose about this earlier, or previous time, that there used to be these on album rock radio stations on Friday, Saturday, Sunday nights, particularly around leading up to or just after midnight. They'd play entire albums, and nobody was fooling anybody. People were recording those on cassette, what I was anyway. But one of them that they'd like to play a lot was metal. And so this song, One of These Days, is kind of the more menacing songs on there. I would have, if I'd just wanted to draw the ire of everybody, put Echoes on, which is a whole side, 23 minutes, 30 minutes. It's a trip, and it does have it harkens back to some of their kind of more abstract earlier stuff in that middle part with the seagull sounds or whatever that is. But One of These Days is just a rocking kind of just, I don't know how to describe it. It's just very menacing, and then of course it's distorted. But the one line in the song is, "One of these days I'm going to cut you into little pieces," which when I was a kid I didn't even know that's what the guy was saying. I just whatever. But who do you know who does that?
Yeah, Nick Mason does it, and it's his only recorded lyric on a Pink Floyd album.
Nice,
Really?
very good.
Wow.
Yeah,
Did
That
not
song
know.
always makes me think of
The
The
Floyd.
Shining,
Yeah,
because there's like this pounding on the door or something, or on the wall, and then screaming that out. So that's a great album. It's maybe overshadowed by what came right after, which was Dark Side of the Moon. But I think this is like really when they were getting into that groove, and they were just a step away from Dark Side of the Moon and everything that followed. So
Yeah, it's it almost feels like I say, other than the one lyric, it just seems like an instrumental type track. So it kind of went good after the one I put on for that, and really with what you did with Sheep and even Sorrow, we were kind of staying in that groove of, hey, these are those. This is what Pink Floyd's known for, right? Is these instrumental tracks that they lay down, and this was another great example of that, which was again laying the foundation for, you could tell, for things on Wish You Were Here, things from Animals, things from Dark Side, all of those kind of, you can start hearing those in this One of These Days thing. And it was written, it's one of the one, I kind of did a quick thing to see what who the artist or who had the credits for writing on each of the songs. And this is one that was done by all of them. So this wasn't Roger Waters or David Gilmour. This was all of them collaborating on this piece. The other one, by the way, was the only other one was Time. Was the first one. So all the other ones are either just a Gilmour, a Waters, a Richard Wright, or some combination of them working together. But none of the rest of the tracks that we have on our playlist has all of them as songwriting credits. So I thought that was interesting.
yeah. I'm glad you brought the writing thing up, because it was kind of what did him in the end. Because eventually it was only Roger Waters coming up with material, and even Gilmour's admitted it's like, oh, well, we just kind of let him take control. They did try a couple songs, like the song I'll talk about, "Remember a Day," was Richard Wright basically, and but those guys would come, but Waters was always writing different lyrics. Great, I mean, pretty much wrote "Wish You Were Here." He wrote probably obviously "The Wall" when he really took over, and then eventually the final cut. But and Animals, he wrote pretty much all of Animals. So it was kind of their thing. Having said that, "Remember a Day." Now I said I'd get back. My personal opinion, this is just it, is Richard Wright was the really heart and soul of Pink Floyd. If you listen to Pink Floyd, you listen to almost all the songs. There's always that we talk about it, there's that piano parts. Those are those piano parts, those subtle piano parts. And he had his problems. He had his and he eventually got fired during the. He actually got fired from Pink Floyd during the Wall recordings because he got into fight because Roger Waters didn't like what he was doing or what he was going on. So, but he actually went on tour with them. He's the only one who made money on that tour. So because he wasn't part of the group and he didn't do Final Cut, and it was nice that Gilmore brought him back when they came back because even I think he understood. Now they weren't doing as much with the last couple albums, but he understood who Richard Wright was, and it really was. And if you listen to especially Dark Side and Great Gig in the Sky, things of that nature, and Remember a Day is one of those songs that where he wrote it and it shines. And the only other, it was never played live until Gilmore did it in 2008, a week after Richard Wright had passed away, to honor him because he liked, obviously they were great friends. One of the reasons I picked it, and because I think Richard Wright was just, he is often overlooked of the squabbles between Gilmore and Waters and how big they were, but I just thought he was really the heart and soul of the group, and I just thought it was a great tribute to him. So anyway.
Yeah, I've heard it before, but at some point this week, reading stuff about him, that he had kind of fallen off during the Wall time period, right? He had either his kids were born, or he's just like he really wanted to focus on his family, and Waters was like, "You're not contributing anything to this," and so that was kind of the end. They kept him. I think he was fired technically, but he kept touring with them.
He
On
was
the
fired,
Wall.
but hired to do the keyboards on the tour. And if you watch, there's some bootleg tour of the '80s. You see him play. He's out there on stage with the rest of the band. Now he didn't do the Final Cut, but yeah, he got fired.
But yeah, I agree that it was great that Gilmore brought him back, and I agree everything you said about. I was thinking when you were talking about his piano playing, I was thinking about that part, the great gig in the sky. He could be on keyboards, he could be on a grand piano. It was all just so good. This song, it's off Saucer Full of Secrets, which is the follow up to Piper at the Gates of Dawn, and you could still kind of hear. Am I right? Did I get that right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, you could still hear the Syd Barrett era stuff there to it for sure. It's not as polished yet as what was to come, but there's not much else I can say about it. I love this record too. I do like it more than its predecessor. It's a little more approachable, but I can't think of another song on it right now. But I have it somewhere. I just haven't listened to it in a while. So
That's the
good.
Control for the Heart of the Sun would probably be the proper choice.
Yeah, actually, I agree. And what was is Careful with That Axe, Eugene, on this?
I don't think it's on that one.
No,
Or maybe that was Umagumma or
Yeah.
Umagumma, whatever. That's a weird one that didn't make our list. It's part new
set the
material.
controls for the Heart of the Sun.
What about the Astronomy Domedy?
That was on the first one.
That was the first one.
Okay.
Seesaw, Jug Band Blues, Corporal Clegg, Let There Be More Light.
Yeah, I thought about picking that song.
I couldn't pick any of those out of a lineup if you.
Oh, that's a good song.
What about the song about the gnome? There's some
That was
song
on the first one. Gimbal the Gnome or whatever his name was. Yeah.
Every time I hear that, I think of Ozzy singing Fairies with Boots.
Oh my God.
Well, this song with Remember a Day, not that it's poppy in any sense, but if you go back to '68, it kind of sounds like their attempt to try to get some radio play, but with a song or whatever. The time amount on it, 4:33, it could be played on FM or something, or on radio. It kind of reminds me of some early Moody Blues kind of stuff too in that time frame, and So not popish, but at least it had a tune to it. Remember a day without a day, you know. So, but I like it. It's probably the one most recognizable song on this album that I did know. So when you put it on the playlist, I went, oh, I know that one. I remember that one.
Well, yeah, you put it on one of the earlier takes. That's how I know it so well.
Right. That maybe that's where it was uh, ingrained in me then for that. You mentioned about, Richard Wright. I think I'd heard something that I don't know if David Gilmour said it or somebody else, but can you imagine what Dark Side of the Moon would have been without Us and Them or without Great Gig in the Sky, right? It just wouldn't have been complete. And and he does other things as well. But yeah, I think he's sometimes underappreciated, and you realize that Pink Floyd carried on without Roger Waters because they had Richard Wright and because they had Nick Mason. And the one thing I didn't know. So I don't know if you mentioned earlier when we were talking, like, so who was it? Just anybody, a session person that filled in on bass for Roger Waters for the two albums that were done after he left, or
Yeah, they just found 2 session musicians to pretty much back it up. Not that they weren't competent, but
Oh.
yeah. And in fairness, they had 2 keyboardists on those tours, and a different drummer as well, because some of the songs were a little more complicated for Nick Mason and Richard Wright, and just to bolster the sound. So just to throw that out there. But yeah, there was kind of 2 session guys for the bass.
Well, then I had an opportunity to put the next selection on, and I had, when we did the draft, I was able to pick the final cut, which I I guess I gotta say, I think it might be my favorite Pink Floyd album of all of them. It's just, and you know what? Sometimes it's not about the greatness of the album or the charting success or the time or whatever. Some of it has to do, as like Micah said a few times. It's like, well, that's what I was listening to over and over and over and over again, in my car or on my 8-track or on my cassette or whatever. And for me, I think it was this 1983, right? I mean, senior year in high school, right? So this is one where as soon as it came out, I rushed out and bought it, and then I probably played the crap out of it, like I don't know how many times, and to the point where I think I had memorized every single lyric of every single song on this album. So it's deep within me, and I had to pick a song on it. It was very difficult because I like all of them, but I picked the Gunner's Dream. Um, just like the melody of it. I like the piano in there, and just everything about the song, the saxophone at the end, and all the things that it builds to. For me, it's just a all time great Pink Floyd song. For me, is the Gunner's Dream.
Yeah. Before I go down memory lane with you, Dave, because I remember how we got this out, when we got this out. But "The Gunner's Dream" is just a fantastic song on that. It's such a great song, and it's so emotional, and it really captures what Roger Waters was trying to convey about not everyone comes back from the war, and it's just great sound effects. Now, I remember the first time we heard it, because we went to Danny Gamboa's house and he played it for him, and all we did was sit there at night and he played the whole album, and we were just mesmerized. And so after that, we got the album, and I've told this story before. We learned it all, we knew it all, and then when we worked together at McDonald's and we worked on the grill, you would throw out a lyric and then I'd follow it up, because we knew that album backwards and forwards. There's not many songs. I know it's your favorite album by far. And it was so much fun to just, when you're working, and then Dave would say something like "floating down," and then you'd have to follow it like "through the clouds," and then you go "memories." Right. See, we know it. And we would go back and forth. We'd almost go through the whole album sometimes just working a shift. So yeah,
I remember we were always breaking that to going, what do they mean by Dresden and Angels 1-5?
or Ben's
And then
been,
we had to go look it up because we didn't have Wikipedia and the internet back then. It took us a while to figure out that it was a concentration camp and it was, all that kind of stuff.
yeah. So yeah, so like you said, Dave, it's one of my top three Pink Floyd out because, and it's really most people consider it just a Roger Waters solo album because by then he had fired Richard Wright, he used Michael Kamen as one of his things. David Gilmour would come in, he'd lay down his tracks, but they never really talked. And then Roger Waters sometimes come and overdub his, thing. So it was, yeah, it was definitely the end of the Floyd as they knew it back then. But yeah, it's one of my favorite albums. As much as people hate that album.
What you said back there a minute ago, Dave, about why sometimes we like records because of where we were and it was in our lives. That's exactly, it was the summer it came out, I think, the summer between my junior year and my senior year. I graduated in '84. And I think Synchronicity came out about the same time too. Because I had both of those cassettes. And that summer I lived with my dad and stepmother and brothers and sister and whatever. And I was working at my dad's restaurant. I just started running then and I was listening to that running, but I also like every night I'd lay down, put on the headphones and, just listen to it end to end. And one thing that really struck me about that, um, it was that you mentioned sound effects. It's like there were so many with the headphones on, there were so many details, like somebody walking through gravel or, just things you wouldn't necessarily catch if you were just listening to it, unless it was really cranked up. And it was a unique experience. I think that was the first time. I mean, yeah, I know they've done that kind of stuff before, but for some reason it really just stood out for me on this record. This is a very emotional song. I think it was moved by a couple things that come up on here. The Falkland Islands War and all the British young men dying in that. A whole ship was blown up. And I'm sure plenty of Argentinians too, of course. I don't want to, but I'm just saying what affected him. His dad died in World War II. I think on a beach. I forget, storming a beach or something. What now?
And
Yeah, Italy. Yeah, so anyway, and then we have another song on this record later. I don't know. I don't want to take everything away that one of us might say, but just to follow up on what you said about some people think of this as a Roger Waters album. I hear that totally. And if it wasn't for some of that guitar work, like on the next song to come out, the final cut, there's some really powerful Gilmore stuff that just um, makes it he had a great contribution, but it really is. You could tell it was just Waters was putting his everything into it. There's a part where he screams and it fades into I forget if it's saxophone. He does it on the final cut too, I think.
That's it on Gutter Stream, yeah.
Yeah, and it's just like it's so cool how it blends and then but when I nowadays when I listen to this and then I listen to the wall, this, and then pros and cons of hitchhiking, it almost seems like, and it maybe was the case, that some of that material came from the same place. Like he had some stuff left over. Like I can definitely there's some things on pros and cons of hitchhiking that there's some elements that are on this album, like little, I don't know, progressions or whatever. So I always thought that was kind of interesting. I love all three of those records. Um, anyway, I'm going on too much about that. So I had the distinct honor of having one of my records, Adam Hart Mother, which is not necessarily one that a lot of people think of when they think of Pink Floyd. And I think um, David Gilmour has kind of dismissed it. It's like we were just all each of us wrote a song and then we slapped together these longer like what was it? Well, Adam Hart Mother, it's like a whole side, and then Alan's Psychedelic Breakfast, which is really interesting, I guess. It's a guy just eating and describing it and some kind of psychedelic stuff going on. But I put on If, And I almost put on Summer of '68. Those are like the two that I do like off this. Fat Old Sun is also a good song, but those are the kind of the two that I really come back to if they I won't skip them when this album comes up, when it's on my playlist or something. And so if he's it's Roger Waters, and he has some of those lines about mental illness and going insane, and just kind of the really getting kind of darker side of Roger Waters that you'll continue to see pop up, most notably in The Wall. But there's not much to it other than that. Summer '68 is a Richard Wright song, and I love that song, even though it really makes rock stars look bad on how they treat the groupies or the girl in every town or whatever. But anyway, that's enough.
Well, I guess I can only say that I'm glad that you got Adam Hart Mother in the draft, because I didn't own it and probably wouldn't have known the songs. There's probably only, like I said, two or three songs you can pick without going long form on us. And so I remembered the Summer of '68. You put that on one of our other playlists that we had. And so I remembered that song, and this one, I'll just tell you, I wasn't familiar with it. I don't think I didn't have the album, and so this was new and fresh to me. It sounded like something that could have came off an album I did have, because I had Obscured by Clouds. Um, I had Metal. So I had some of these other albums that it probably could have been on one of those, but I didn't have Adam Hart Mother. So um, uh, for me, this was kind of like, oh, I'm not familiar with this song, so I caught myself going back and listening to it several times, going, oh, this is right in the wheelhouse, and perfect type of Pink Floyd acoustic kind of song, you know. But yeah, good choice. I liked it.
Yeah, I think we didn't know, but it's because of Mike that he owned the album. That's the first time I got to listen to it, and it's as you delve into it more, you get to like it more. Of course, Summer of '68 is just one of our fan favorites because it was on that tape and it just blended so well. But if is like Mike said, is Roger Waters really finding his voice? That voice of despair and cynicism, so to speak, and he did play it at the Radio Chaos on the Radio Chaos tour. So it was kind of different to hear, like, oh my God, he's playing If out of, you never would have thought that he would play something like that, but he did, and it was a great thing. So yeah, that album, like I said, Mike was the one who kind of introduced it to our universe, so to speak. And it really is a good album in the sense that they're all trying to find their footing now. Obviously, Roger Waters was a little better at it than some of them, but still a fun album to listen to. So then I had the task of I got Wish You Were Here, the album, and there's not a bad song on. It's like trying to pick from Dark Side. It's like trying to pick from uh Animals. You just can't, any song you pick is going to be good. Now, probably the Wish You Were Here is probably the most recognizable song and is used a lot in a lot of different, more mainstream than a lot of them. Even though, let's face it, Shine on Your Crazy Diamond is probably the best song on that, the two parts. And if you ever get the Greatest Hits Echoes, they combine the two, which is really kind of awesome. But I obviously went with Wish You Were Here, which is a lot of people know, whether they like Pink Floyd or not. It's one of those songs that everybody knows. Both artists sing it. It's it's one of those songs that evokes a lot of emotion because if anybody wish you were here, it's someone that passed away or something of that nature. I know it's been played at funerals, so it's just one of the I say one of the top 10 songs of all time as far as people recognizing it and understanding it. And so uh, you could have gone Welcome to the Machine, but I didn't think that fit in there, or Have a Cigar, but because they don't sing on it, Roy Harper does, that I thought Wish You Were Here was probably the logical choice. And we talk about Richard Wright, we talk about his piano playing, but it's his keyboard playing in the backgrounds of Shine On that and in Animals that really should, is key to those songs. So anyway, I'm going on.
Yeah, no, I would say the same thing I did with metal. If there were no boundaries and we could all put hour-long songs or half an hour long songs, Shine On You, Crazy Diamond would be the hands down for me. It's like this album, that song in particular, but even this song, it's they're talking about Sid Barrett, and it's I guess Roger Waters and he went to art school together.
They did.
That's where they kind of the band kind of the genesis of it. But that said, this is an amazing song. It's always been one that I love. It's very moving, and I remember a notable time that I heard somebody else cover it was a concert after 9/11. There was it was like concert for New York or something. It was a several hour long, and different artists I mean, like directors or whatever, put out little movies like Spike Lee, I think Woody Allen, and in between those went in between different musicians. And somebody covered this song. I think I may be wrong, but I think maybe this is one of them where they had brought out some New York firefighters or whatever rescue workers. But it was very moving and just a beautiful song, a well written song.
So this is the first of two on our playlist that is songwriting credit is Gilmore and Waters. So nobody else, not just Waters, not just Gilmore. This is their collaboration, and you can see the greatness of it. I'm glad that you put on the title track to it. Again, I like Shine On. I like also the whole album, but this is my favorite song on the album. And even it got a lot of commercial success. So I'm glad we threw in some songs that people are going to really recognize with whether they're Pink Floyd fans or not. You can't not hear this song and know that it's Pink Floyd. It's interesting too. Over the last several years, as I'm scrolling through YouTube or I'm looking at different things on the internet, and you see a lot of street musicians covering this song. They could be, on the streets of wherever, and they're covering this song. So it's one of my favorite ones. Just love the whole thing, how it's written, the lyrics, everything about it. From there, I had the Division Bell was my next one, and again, I'm trying to remember if I owned it at the time. I probably didn't. It probably wasn't until um, later years that I got into listening to this album. But there were just a couple songs. I was, a Great Day for Freedom was probably the one that I was going to pick right off the bat. I was just because it has that orchestration in it, and I just love it. It's just a masterpiece song that Gilmore put together. But my favorite song on it is this song "Lost for Words." Maybe because it's more acoustic and everything. I like that about Pink Floyd, but just the whole lyrics of it, where he's trying to make amends with his neighbors and everything, and they don't want to have anything to do with it, and just a well crafted song. And anyway, thought I would put it on. Was probably looking for an opportunity to put this on a playlist somewhere, and since we did Pink Floyd, I said, well, this will be the place I'll put it on.
Yeah, Division Bell probably isn't one of my favorites, Pink Floyd, but does have some good songs. And I have to admit, most of the songs that I've heard off this album have been David Gilmour solo. Like there's Live at Gdansk, and there's Live at Pompeii when he went back and did it himself, not the refurbished version they just did. But he plays a lot of his songs. But I have to admit, I hadn't listened to the song a lot, but it really grew on me the last week and a half when we were playing it. I was like, man, how did I miss this song? There's High Hopes, which is a good song as well, but this one, man, I think it was my favorite because I hadn't heard it a lot, and it really is a stunning song, and it's one of those songs that captures the essence of sometimes how you feel. So you don't have to care. So I just thought it was a great song and a great choice.
Yeah, I think my experience with this album was yours, um, with, oh my gosh, Dave, what is it? Momentary lapse of reason. Momentary lapse of reason, excuse me. I didn't have the record at the time. In fact, strangely enough, I kind of missed, I don't know what was going on in my life at the time, but I kind of missed that it even came out for a while. And then I think I heard High Hopes on the radio, which I really liked. And but even after that, and A Great Day for Freedom, the even after that, I don't think I ever bought it. It was only later when you could get it streaming. I couldn't tell you why. It's just, again, wherever I was into something else. But and so I'm not really familiar with it. And this song is I really like, and I'm glad you put it on. It's You're right. You can really, it is, well, David Gilmour is the singer, on these songs. So it really does have his kind of sound to it. But it's still, I consider it as much a Pink Floyd album as the one before. Yeah. So, I was next. And I had I had Obscured by Clouds, which is kind of an interesting one. It was never really, I had it early on. And I think I still have that copy of it. Um, but there were certain songs in there I really liked, and others I'm like, whatever. I put on Burning Bridges, and I'll get to that in a second. But Jose, you would reference it. Well, I don't want to take your. I'll let you talk about it. But the one that I really liked from it the most was Free Four, which also made a playlist, at least one back in the day. And but for the same reason, I didn't want to put that on. I mean, I know it doesn't break the rules or whatever, but I wanted to push it. So yeah, this um, Burning Bridges, it's kind of, I remember liking it when I got the record. It was like it's a slower, more melodic, right song. And is it? Yeah. And I didn't realize that there were so many songs back in the day that he would sing on that for some reason I just assumed it was David Gilmour. And it was only later that I'm like, oh, wait a minute. But yeah, it's interesting. It's like it's a poem, it's really, I mean, whatever, you could say that about most lyrics. It's kind of this poetic elements to them, but this really is. It's like I'm not really clear what it's about. There's like imagery of like a gilded cage and somebody breaking free. I mean, I doubt that it's talking about a bird, but it could be somebody leaving a relationship, could be about somebody passing away. I'm curious what you guys think. I liked it more for the sound and just interesting lyrics. I actually, even putting this together, I didn't look it up and see what they mean.
This is one where I'm sure somewhere along the lines, I put this on a mixtape somewhere back in the day because it's always been one of my favorite songs off this album. I too like Free Four, and actually earlier when we were doing our playlist and we did the Pink Floyd, where we did the threefers, right? And we did three for each from each band. I put on What's the Deal, which is one of my favorite ones.
How could I forget that? Yeah.
This is probably my second favorite one, and it's funny that this song is interesting because I was riding in the car with my youngest daughter Jenna, and she's like, "Hey, Dad, you got to hear this song. It's now I guess because they have all these things like Spotify and Pandora and whatever." They sometimes get exposed to different music, and she puts this song on, and it was Burning Bridges, and I'm like, she's like, do you know this song? This is like Pink Floyd. And I'm like, yeah, I know this song. She's done that to me a couple times with like an old Led Zeppelin song and with a Pink Floyd song. Then I usually say something like, oh, well, have you heard of like Dark Side of the Moon or something? She's like, no, I haven't, so I take it as an opportunity to turn her on to some other music. But This is one that must have came up on her playlist and she thought it was cool and she said, "Hey, you got to listen to this song." And so, yeah, good choice. Love it.
That's
Yeah.
some good parenting right there.
For sure. Well, I'll tell you, when Sal came out of his, he had to have his teeth, one of his teeth pulled once, and he came out, and of course, you're in that haze. I just stuck in "Wish You Were Here" just to mellow him through it, and it seemed to work. So Pink Floyd does wonders. Should always pass it along. And yeah, Burning Bridges has been part of our life because Dave did put it on one of the tapes before. And now I've told Mike this before, and Obscured by Clouds is one of my favorites only because of the first two tracks. They're instrumentals, and I won't get into the reasons why I think there's some. It it is one of my favorites, and I get a little obsessive. And I even went out and found bootlegs of the '73 shows where they actually played the instrumentals. But this, like Dave said, it's one of those songs that is just so fantastic that fits right in it, and it really is kind of overlooked a lot because of What's of the Deal and Free Four. So I'm glad I liked Lost for Words and Burning Bridges back to back. I thought two songs that I don't get to listen to very often, but really make an impact, really get into your universe, especially when I'm walking around. I'm like, that's right, I've heard these songs a lot. So so then I got to choose. I got The Wall, and I call it the draft. And again, how do you pick one song off four sides? That I at one point I think The Wall, because I guess it varies, was my favorite album for the longest time. There's a lot of different reasons. Dave had the 8-track, and I used to listen to it endlessly on loop. I fall asleep, put on the headphones and listen to it. Obviously, the movie had a big impact. Even in 2012, they talking about I took Salvador and I went to see when Roger Waters recreated the whole wall, did the whole wall thing. And so I went with just kind of trying to get in the feel with Lost for Words. So I went with Nobody's Home. We all know the song. I got a little black book with my poems in it. Once you start something like that, and then the piano part. And so I just thought, yeah, I could have gone with some of the more well-known songs, which Dave does eventually, and some of the more different songs. But I thought about going with The Trial, but that's just way too out there. So it's fun to
Oh,
watch.
I like that song though. Yeah, that's a good one.
It's a great song, but it is a little bit obscure. So, but I thought Nobody's Home, and it always is one of those songs that you can sing along to and by heart. So
Yeah, and he, of course, there's a Gomer Pyle, well
right.
placed. Surprise, surprise, surprise. But yeah, this one, there's so many sad songs. I mean, this guy is melting down, like, to the bottom, and this is now his relationship is completely falling apart. I think that was happening to Roger Waters around the same time. So he was probably speaking from experience on some of this. And for some reason, this one, I know it's not right next to one of my turns, but for some reason in my mind, they're kind of related. It's like one, he's like just the burnout, and then the other kind of side of the coin, he's flipping out, but it's all over kind of the same thing going through his head. I know they're on different sides of the record, but I had to look, even though I've heard it so many times, I couldn't quite remember where this one was on the list. But so there's The Wall. It starts making an appearance.
Yeah, it's hard to pick songs off the wall too, just because it's like the way they blend together and whatnot. And so this is one of the ones though that kind of stands alone for me. I like it. It's always been one of my favorite songs on the album, and so I'm glad you put it on. I think even back to some of the lyrics in it were like, how many channels do you say? 14 channels? You know, we have a lot. We have a lot more than that now to choose
Yeah.
from. So
This is still a bunch of crap, though.
Right, he does change it up, and when he sang, he'd say he had like 400, and when they did it live, he does change it, so just throw that out.
Oh, he does. I didn't know that.
Yeah,
So anyway, I like it. It's I like the piano and the acoustic kind of stuff. So it's what I like. And then really from Gunner's Dream, If, Wish You. I mean, we just kind of got in that acoustic kind of thing after we'd done the big numbers and the long form and all that. So I was gonna probably do something off the wall for my wild card anyway, not necessarily thinking I would go back to back, but I was down to my last choice. Now I will say that if you had gone with the trial, then I probably would have gone with brain damage, because it kind of, the whole lunatic thing or whatever. But at this point, I just wanted to pick, a classic commercial iconic song that everyone's going to know. And for me, that's Another Brick in the Wall, part two. And then Jose said, well, do you want to put that first part on there, that leads into it? And I said, oh yeah, probably want to put that on there too, I guess. So got away with putting that little minute 50 song, Happiest Days of Our Lives, before that, which leads into the radio version of You Don't Need No, uh, yeah, all that. So anyway, Another Brick in the Wall.
I'm sorry, can we pause a moment?
Yeah.
We have some kind of something going on here. I'll be right back. I'll edit this. I hope I didn't mess. Were you done there, Dave? Did I mess you up?
No, I finished, so perfect.
Okay. Give me just a second.
sure.
Come here. Yes, she was lying on the bed.
The only other thing I was gonna maybe say that you could say, Jose or Mike, is that
Don't let her in.
having the kids
Sorry,
there was something that was kind of new and different, right? So when we had that, everyone would love that. Oh, look at the British kids singing, it was all like,
Yeah,
And
so sorry about that. We had this last week. We had my son's dog got out, and we had 3 really traumatic hours looking for her till we finally found her. They didn't know just now that she's in here with me, and so they've been freaking out for a while. So that's why Rachel came in and interrupted. Anyway, my apologies. I'll edit that out.
I'm a good dog. They sometimes throw me a bone.
Got wild stuff.
So
I like the inevitable pinhole burns down the front of my.
so at this point, it's I guess you jumping in, Mike, with
no, I think it's me jumping in.
Yeah.
I mean, oh yeah, I'm sorry, you Jose first, yeah.
Okay, so let's start. 3, 2, okay. So yeah, The Wall, again, we just talked about it. So Dave did put on the hit. Everyone knows this song, even if it was controversial. We don't need no education, that kind of thing. And it was also kind of, people used to, oh, it's kind of disco Pink Floyd with the beat and stuff like that. So people used to kind of make a joke about it. But it was one of the more popular songs, and I'm ambivalent about after you've heard it so many times, but you also realize what he's really trying to say in that, that about education. And people all thought, oh yeah, you don't need education, which of course is totally ridiculous. But he also is pointing out the inequities in education, and what can happen if it goes in the wrong hands. So yeah, again, The Wall used to be one of my favorites. I've heard it so many thousands of times. I think I wore out one vinyl version, and I had to buy a whole second vinyl version because the first one just crapped out on me. So yeah, and I used to have it on tape. And like I said, if you ever are out there, if you're into bootlegs like I am, Roger Waters did a thing. It's called Under Construction, and he goes through the whole album, and but it's just all these scaled back Wall songs that you can listen to. This was when he tried to present it like, this is what I want to do next, and he has a tape of it. So just throwing that out there.
Yeah, when I think of, we talked about, you mentioned money, and then we talked about Wish You Were Here, songs that people really knew. If they didn't even know Pink Floyd, really, they would know those songs. I think, though, this one maybe overshadowed them in that way just because it was more recent. But it's like, I don't know anybody you know, even for years after this came out, that didn't know that song, you know. It's very, and it got a lot of airplay. I don't know how high up the charts it went. Um, so, and I love this album. The thing about adding that first part, which is basically a helicopter and a guy yelling, I guess the schoolmaster or whatever yelling at him. The It reminds me of like We Are the Champions and the other one. The two parts of that song.
Flat
Um,
bottom. Flat
say
bottom.
what?
Flat
We will
bottom.
rock you.
We will rock you, and you know I should prepare before. Anyway, we will rock you, and we are the champions. And because yeah, they're presented like on the record or CD or whatever, as separate songs, but you would never think of them. You know, those are more complete songs almost. But um, yeah, I think it was great that you included that little part at the beginning. So this is my added bonus song, and it was Fearless off Metal. So I've done two off Metal. I was gonna do something different. I think I was either gonna do a Sid Barrett song. I felt like I wanted to get something on by him. I had a couple of different ideas, but they didn't really seem to fit. And then I remember just I love, you know, this Fearless is such a great song. The thought behind it, the lyrics, it's just like you know, nothing nothing is unattainable with, you know, yes, obviously some things are, but I mean, putting your mind to it and rising above, you know, you say that hill's too steep to climb, well, I'll climb it in my own way, you know. And then it ends with uh, that you'll never walk alone. I think it's a bunch of football fans because was it Manchester or one of the teams? That's one that they often sing, or at least they used to. But anyway, I wanted to put again. There's so many other songs off Metal. Saint Tropez I like, and the Seamus about the blues song. Is it Seamus or Seamus? Seamus?
Seamus, Seamus.
Seamus?
I don't know.
Uh, anyway, whatever that dog, it's a blues song where it has a got dog howling solo, which is anyway. So yeah, I one more go at Metal.
Um, so with this song, I mean, this is one that I've always loved this song, and I think I secretly told Mike when we were picking songs or albums that this is one of my ones. So I don't know if he did it for me or what, but he used his wild card to add this one, and this is one of my favorites. Always liked it. I think I put it on tapes, not only our playlist, but probably other tapes over the years. I just like how, like you said, it's just a great tune. And then in the ending of it, you know, when they get the whole crowd thing going and they're chanting it or whatever, I think that's pretty unique and different. Never heard anything like that on a record or on a song before. Um, so yeah, thanks for putting it on because it brought back a lot of memories for me.
Yeah, for sure. It's one of those songs that definitely made one of our tapes back in the day. You never get tired of it. Now, interestingly enough, uh, and I'll throw that. Obviously, I listen to the Government Mule, and on occasion, Warren Haynes does concerts where he does all Pink Floyd, and he does songs like Fearless and stuff like that. And if you've ever heard Blue Floyd, they're out there. There's a group that's no longer around, but you can find some of their booths out there, and they did Pink Floyd as well. So that's how I kind of know the song. I didn't know Warren Haynes singing "Fearless" more. I, I was just stunned that he would sing that song, but obviously he obviously knows a great song when he hears it. So I just thought, and of course that points to, of course, my metal must have been his thing because, like my last one, I picked the Final Cut off the Final Cut, and of course because that's just you hate to the lack of a better phrase, that's our album. That's the album that really made a big impact. And of course, it was Dave coming up with, well, why should we have Southampton, Doc, before we have the Final Cut? Only because I think Dave loves that album so much and loves that
Put the
song.
whole thing on, yeah.
I know.
But the end of the song starts into the final cut. So
It does, but it was kind of funny. I was like, yeah, Dave loves this album way too much, which I don't blame him because I do. And it was fun. It's always fun to listen to it, because you love Southampton Dock with their handkerchief and their summer frost clings to her wet body. And we just know that album so well. And then, of course, the final cut. That was another one where he had lyrics in there. It's like, would you sell your story to Rolling Stone? Which was about someone who wrote about the Floyd, they sold their story. And you're like, what? And blowing holes and bandsmen by remote control. You're like, oh my God, what is that all? You had to look that stuff up because you really didn't know what he was talking about. And I thought it was apropos, obviously, to make it the final song on our Pink Floyd playlist.
Yeah, this one of that on that album, and we've done what Two Sons in the Sunset we put on a previous playlist, but off that record, those are my top favorites. I mean, they're all like you said, it's just one big thing, but I don't know, not now, John.
Love that.
the radio clean version or the actual.
But they actually, yeah, they had that was on the radio. I used to hear that, not anymore, but yeah, this one, it's such an emotional, again, it's another one about, he's just like, it's still probably coming from this place, his gut-wrenching place inside of him, Roger Waters, where, this relationship is falling apart, which also continues on into his next thing, which is solo pros and cons of hitchhiking, but it's the one I forgot to mention this. The other real memory I have about this record, that fall after I got back, I went looking it was already my senior year, but I was going to look at schools, and I drove out to Texas Tech, and with a buddy of mine, and driving back, I put this cassette on, and we were in front. This front was moving through just like a squall line, and the lightning and everything, but it was behind us. It was like chasing us, and we went to stay at my grandmother's house. She had gone on to live in elsewhere, but her house was still there. And so we're just listening to this with this lightning and these West Texas highways with nothing around. It was just this, I don't know how to explain it. It was a once in a lifetime thing. It was just like everything just fit right in, and this turned way up. We could hear every little thing. The only other thing I want to add, when the shotgun goes off, when you go through whatever, there's a lyric there that gets covered up by that?
If you listen to the
Two
headphones.
shotguns in the hall. Dial the combination. Open the priest hole. I never had the nerve. And then, right? Is that
Or
what?
no, if I'm in, and then when the shotgun sounds, he's like, "I'll tell you what's behind the wall," something
Yeah.
like that.
I think
And I didn't know that till years later. You could hear there was something, but yeah, which I thought was interesting.
the final cut has a lot of behind, like there's one of the songs you can hear there's a clock that's constantly playing in the background. It's ticking constantly. But if you don't pay attention to it, but if you have to listen to it on the headphones, I think it's in Behind Paranoid Eyes, which we haven't played yet either. And hide, and there's a clock ticking. Of course, at the beginning, get your filthy hands off my desert.
Looking up the lyrics of the song at that moment, it says, dial the combination, open the priest hole. He says, and if I'm in, I'll tell you.
Oh, I heard somebody was what's behind the wall. Maybe it is, I'll tell you.
So he says, and if I'm in, I'll tell you. And then it goes, there's a kid who had a big, but I don't know if that.
Girl. Oh, okay.
I know I read that somewhere, but maybe not. Maybe
I've heard that.
Yeah.
Anyway, go ahead.
Interesting. No, all good stuff. It's like I said, it's one of my favorite albums, and I'm glad you put it on, and probably good to put it on at the end, the final cut. Yeah, not much more I can say about it. Just, I think they also had a video on it back then, or because it wasn't at the MTV generation or whatever. So I remember there was a video on this song, and they played it a lot. But
Well, actually, he made several videos. It was like a video album he tried to produce. So there's videos of all the songs. If you go look up on
oh,
YouTube,
okay.
find a lot of videos on even not now, even not now, John, and stuff like that. So anyway, on that out there.
Nice. Well, it was a great trip down memory lane, looking at all the Pink Floyd songs. Are there some notable ones that you wish you would have put on, or that we didn't put on? We mentioned a couple of the commercial ones. Comfortably Numb comes to mind, is probably one that could have made it on the list, but we didn't. Do you have any others?
I guess Money would probably be the only other one that really everybody knows that you play and everyone knows that song. So, but yeah, other than that, it's like Mike said, it's hard to pick one song off one album, especially the run from Dark Side to The Wall. I mean, those 4 albums I consider probably one of the top runs of anyone who's made albums before. So, but yeah, I don't think there was anything we touched on. Of course, we went heavy on albums that we like, so and that doesn't, obviously the wild card items. But yeah,
We didn't include with this 2 records. One of them's not, I guess, official. Well, it's officially a Pink Floyd record, but it's not a completely studio album. I still don't know. Somebody can correct me on it. Umagama or Umaguma, whatever. Has some interesting stuff. And then The Endless River,
Endless River, yeah.
which I don't know. Gilmore doesn't reflect well back on that either. He's like, even though it was kind of dedicated to write, because it was like all stuff that they kind of, I guess, stuff that ended up on the studio floor or whatever, that this great piano and orchestral pieces and stuff. But I don't know. I could name every other Pink Floyd song, with maybe the exception of a few off the first couple of records. Oh, we didn't have More, which was I think a soundtrack. And they also did a movie called Zabriskie Point. They did
Point, yeah.
some songs off of, but I don't know those. I never had either of those. But every other thing, I could have, any song we didn't put on, I would have been great.
Well, good. Well, I guess that's a wrap then for this, and hope everyone enjoyed it. More so than listening to us blab on about Pink Floyd, we really want you to go look at the videos and check out the playlist and listen to the music. And hopefully you like it. Take care.